event. That was a big thing. But one of the things that made that possible for people to be interested in was the whole cam, where they could use the camera to show the audience at home. And then the third part, and probably the most important part, was online poker. Because then it gave people that were intimidated to go into a casino and sit at a table the anonymity to buy in, learn the game, lose their money without anybody mocking them. And so those three events all happened, at a very similar point in time, and it was very potent, and that's what caused the explosion.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, one of the other things that happened from online is that, younger players were now able to play, because they could play multiple tables. They were able to play millions of hands that otherwise would take like a lifetime. So all of a sudden you get somebody online, and in a year or two, they've played as many hands as Doyle Brunson played in his life.
This is correct. I used to play with 6 windows open, and I had friends that would have 3 screens in front of them, and they would have at any given time 24 fucking games going. I couldn't do that. Like 6 tables was the most I could actually play. But you're right. Even with 6, I was probably seeing more flops than poker pros from the past. But these guys that were playing like 24 games at the same fucking time, absolutely insane. And then they had automation to tell them, like the tendencies of their opponents. They would tell them if they fold on the flop, if they fold on the turn, and then if you could find people that are loose or passive, you'd be able to play them.
So Roger, let me ask you this question. Somebody I saw made a comment today, which I agree with anyway, that even though this person has played online poker, he said never, never in the future because of AI. He just thinks that, it's,
I think whoever said that is foolish, because if anything, what the AI is going to allow us to get better at is bot defense. And so if you're not a human, it'll be able to more easily detect that. And so while there's been a history of all kinds of corruption in these games, from people that work for the online gaming company having a God account where they could see the other players' cards, that actually happened, to people having bots playing optimal strategy for them, which, by the way, if you ever want to tip that over, all you have to do is just start playing like a maniac, and then they don't know what to do. But no, I would say that what the ability to identify if somebody is a bot or not is actually going to make the game safer.
Interesting libertarian approach, like let the market fix it.
I wouldn't. There's too much stuff that's happened in online poker, and like things that you won't even know. For the average person, like you should stay away from it. The only time it would make sense is for somebody who's going to do this full time, that's going to know every piece of software, like the stuff that Roger referenced that tells you about people's tendencies, which some of the sites actually, I think, tried to ban, so you weren't supposed to play with that, all sorts of stuff, okay? It's so different than playing a live game,
It is definitely different, but, there's people from pockets of the world that you would have thought, how did they learn how to play Texas Hold'em? And online poker is what got them there. Like the Norwegians, for example, these guys, when they get online, they, like, just like anything else, you're going to have cultural phenomena. Whatever reason, they just decided to play a far more aggressive style of poker. And for a while there, nobody could really handle it because, if you were trying to use, traditional poker math, you would say, oh, I don't have the odds to call that. I'm not going to. And these Norwegians were just running over people until people started playing with them more frequently. And then they realized that, okay, I'll use their aggression against them. And then you would play ultra passive until they played aggressive. And then you'd come back over the top of them. And then you would scare them away. So there's all kinds of, it's an evolving game on how styles are played. One of the most interesting things is there was probably maybe 100 people on the planet that were playing the game with optimal strategy. And then Doyle Brunson writes a book because he realized that writing a book would give him more money than he was winning playing in poker on what optimal strategy was. And then you've got all these poker enthusiasts that, for the last 30 years are reading this shit. And now you've got people that are sitting in a low limit game that know more about the game of poker than Brunson probably did for the first 10, 15 years of him playing poker. And so in order to respond to that, you have to think about, like, okay, what does my opponent know about this game? Do they know odds? Do they know pot odds? Do they know implied odds? Do they know position? Do they know good starting hands? And you try to decipher how knowledgeable they are. And if they're a really good player, then you have to ask yourself, how do you beat a really good player? And the way you beat a really good player is by being very tight, but then with the hands that you play, but then super fucking aggressive when you do come into a hand. There's all kinds of ways to do this, and I'm by no means a fucking expert. At a certain limit, I'm a profitable player. At another limit, I am absolutely the fish at the table. And the thing that dictates this is not just bankroll, because there's plenty of people with a big bankroll that just know better than to stay out of some games. There are some games that are I'm just not suited for. There's fucking people that can calculate this stuff in their head automatically. And on top of that, they have the discipline to play consistently. My big problem was always I would get bored playing well, and then I would say to myself, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. And then during that mix it up period, that's what I do.
I doubt Doyle Brunson wrote the book because he thought he'd make more money from the book than he made playing poker. I think he just decided to write a book, whatever, I don't think there was.
If he was making it like what people think Doyle Brunson was making playing poker, I don't think he would give the secrets away that made him a profitable player. I think what he realized was, like, it doesn't matter. Let me just go sell this fucking book. In fact, what he should have fucking done is wrote a book and told people how to play poorly.
Yeah, but you actually read that book. He's not like telling you things that any like reasonable poker player wouldn't have already figured out. So maybe he makes an absolute amateur more educated, before they maybe start playing anything. But I think anyone that was playing poker, even against him, who may not have been as good, I mean, in terms of like range of starting hands and stuff like that, I mean, at some point, you figure that stuff out. I mean, I don't think Doyle will tell them,
I think what that book does is it accelerates the learning curve. If you take somebody that's got an interest in learning poker and you let them read, you can read that book, or you can read, No Limit Poker for Dummies. There's a lot of things that you could read that basically accelerate, I would say, minimum 5 years of what it would take for you going and losing in a casino, maybe 10 years of it. And then there's some people that, because they're just not smart, they'll never fucking do it. And I know people like that you give them suited connectors, they'll play them for any price and any.
Right. I think
the Iranians were dying in the streets.
For Doyle,
They were dying, and all they
you're
were
right.
saying is,
It accelerates the learning curve of like the amateurs, right? But to the extent, let's say the people. And most of the people he was playing against, even when he was playing in his heyday, none of them are like amateurs, but by the time you're playing him, right? So, they kind of figured out the connector stuff, and they figured all this stuff out, okay? They didn't need to read his book. His book was for charging citizen. So you made charging citizen, if they read the book, a better player, but charging citizen was probably not sitting at a table with Doyle Brunson, so it really didn't matter.
Yeah, well, now things have changed where, like, if you were to ask some of these kids that are playing how to play jacks pre-flop from the button, I think the answer that you're going to get from young kids today is going to be fundamentally different than what Doyle Brunson would have told you 30 years ago.
That's probably true. By the way, there was just a hand. You don't know about this. Just happened. When he had this hand in the World Series of Poker main event, like today against the Midwest. Okay. I can't even believe the way it got reported. I read the story only because I thought this was going to be like some hand where maybe a 4 of a kind will beat a full house or something like that, But no, it wasn't that. Okay. So a well-known professional player, and these are names that like I don't even know anymore because like most of the people I knew who were professional, because I'm old, are old. I mean, they don't even really play anymore. Even Helmut, they basically just play the events they won a bunch. This guy had pocket aces. The other guy had pocket nines. Okay. And the guy with aces, I think he's 6 bet. The guy with the nines. Okay. The guy with the nines, up until, until when I guess just called it, he stopped raising, right? But it went from like raise, right? And the guy's only got pocket nines, okay? The flop comes 9-4-3, okay?
Surveillance video
and
wild moments.
The guy with the aces bets out.
Car to bust.
I forgot what the pot size. All this matters, but I forgot what the pot size was. But so the guy with the aces, makes a decent sized bet.
Suspects
Okay, the guy with the nines just flat calls.
no success.
Okay.
So far, no arrests have been made.
I think the turn.
The Supreme Court ruled this morning that South
I don't
Carolina
know
is
what happened on the
allowed.
turn.
Planned Parenthood is not a qualified healthcare provider.
But on the referendum, the last 19, right?
The intruder unallowed.
And the guy with the aces shoots in his entire bank note, the whole thing. But of course he gets, instant call by the guy with 4 nines. But, I don't consider that like a freaking miracle. I mean, it was a miracle hand that he got 4 nines. But it wasn't like he got that, I think it sounded like it was a bad beat. No, he was behind from the flop. It got worse by the time he got to the river. And, but I mean, the guy who played the 9 just got lucky. And in fact, the guy with the aces probably should have, at some point should have just put them all in pre-flop, but made it like where we'd have to go all in pre-flop. So he probably displayed that hand, because it goes to your whole comment about jacks. Jacks with 9s at that point are basically the same hand, Either you're going to hit a set or you're not, But, one of the most dangerous things when you have pocket aces, even when your head's up, is the other person having it in set. And you've always got to take that into consideration,
Yeah, no, you're right.
Guy over here.
Well, it's tournament chips,
So this
by the way,
guy,
it's
let's
not cash.
call him Gio.
It was the main event of one of the games of the World Series, so it's tournament chips. So I mean, but they're playing for whatever. I don't remember the size of the pot, but they are tournament chips. But if you lose the hand, you're out of the tournament. That's the bigger deal. One of the things in a tournament is you want to kind of last a while. And this was early. I think this is early in the tournament. This is early in the main event. And this guy who lost, because I think this was day 1 for him or something. It's going to go 4 days. He said, I'd rather that happened on day 1 and on day 4, and this way I don't have to lose 3 days because now he knows he lost,
So here's the thing about a tournament. If you have pocket aces, even the best holdings that somebody has against you, you're an 80% favorite to win. Which, if you're playing a cash game, and you think, I like to think of cash games as one long session rather than just individual sessions. I think my lifetime playing cash games. So if I want to lay down a hand, I'll lay down a hand. There's no urgency the way that, because a cash game is a infinite game, whereas a tournament game is finite. And when you're in a finite game, the goal is to get everybody's chips. Even if you are an 80% favorite to win, I'm not suggesting you fold them, but the math will say that if over the course of a 4-day tournament, if you were dealt pocket aces 5 times and happened to get all your chips in, mathematically you're supposed to lose one of those 5. And so when 1 out of 5 hands, when you go all in pre-flop with aces, over the long haul, 1 out of 5, you're going to lose. And so I think that sometimes people, when they're in a tournament, they lose sight of what the ultimate goal is. And look, if I can double through somebody and I've got pocket aces, I'm going to do that. But depending on what's happening, like for example, if there was 2 people on short stacks and we're about to make the money, I can even there are times in a tournament that I can convince myself that folding aces even pre-flop.
I agree, but this was not one of those situations. This was really early in the tournament. It got the heads up. I mean, obviously, you realize that in a ring game, if there's still 7 people in the thing after the when you go to the flop, aces are not even the favorite. The field is the favorite, right? Okay, but this was none of that. This got the heads up. Okay, and quite frankly, 80-20, whatever you want to call it. Okay, I'm putting that person all in because you know what? Here's what happened. And this is exactly what happened in this situation. If you allow a flop to come, the guy has some sort of hand. You don't know what it is. It could be 4-7 offsuit. He could have been, but you don't know if the board comes 4-7-7. You don't know where you are. Okay, after the flop, that's far more dangerous. Not knowing where you are after the flop, okay, than going all in heads up with aces.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I 100% agree. I like 99 out of 100 times, if I've got aces pre-flop and I've got somebody that's willing to raise me, I'm shoving all in, to try to take it down there or take my fact that I'm favored at this point in time, and then see the whole hand that way. However, if there are circumstances that make you think, fuck, at this moment in time, losing my whole stack would be really fucking detrimental.
And you went through those. If you're on the bubble with all that stuff, but that's by the way, this on the bubble thing. You say you don't care. I think that stuff's way too complicated for like this room. If you don't mind losing every single person who's here.
No, I think the only people really tuning in right now is me, you, and Norm. But Norm, I think would understand that, like, if let's say the top 500
at the audience, there's still like 13 people. I don't know if they're paying attention.
But most of them are doing housework and then just casually listening and waiting for somebody to jump in the room and curse somebody out. That's kind of like what the audience does. But what's interesting about the bubble, right, is like, let's say if you're in a big tournament, they're going to pay money to the top 500 people. Once you find yourself in like there's 510 people left, and let's just say making it past the bubble just gets your money back, or maybe doubles your money. The strategy dramatically changes at this time. If you're short stack, you just want to survive, and if you have a bigger stack, you know that people are in survival mode, so you can steal blinds very aggressively, right? And so it's one of the most interesting parts of the game. And so what I've noticed that with the aggressive people is like, it used to be the people with the big stacks would be ultra aggressive when we get to the right to the bubble. Now what people have learned is that people they know that you got to play tighter as you get to the bubble, and so then you can get those mid stacks that start playing aggressive to steal blinds. And if somebody comes over the top, then they typically lay it down. But that's my favorite part of the tournament, because that's when the heroes are made, is right before you get.
We just lost you. Or your mic is off. So.
Sorry, I muted. Did you guys hear that last part?
I'm not sure, because I'm not sure what the last part is.
I was just saying that people play differently when we're getting to the bubble. Yeah. There's Mike. Mike was in the other room, supporting the other room when they were having their drama. Mike likes the drama. Mike won't come up. Oh, there he is.
Supporting. Come on, we're better.
Why were you supporting the drama, Mike?
I love the drama. She's going to.
We've got like one tea bag that we've been using to make tea for the past 4 years since COVID,
Sure.
and we finally got a little week
Chicago,
ago.
she's going to jail forever. Bankruptcy for sure.
Ken, what you missed earlier was some old school clubhouse drama where
Really?
some people
Yeah,
in
that's
other
cool.
rooms were allowing people to go crazy and say racist shit, and then they claim victims when they got called out on it.
Well, you know, I don't hang around with that stuff anymore. That's why I'm really not on here a lot anymore. I actually came into the room because about the title initially, but we've lost all the New Yorkers. So I was just going to say that in my view, I think the only two really, I shouldn't say only, but the two best food cities, and I don't think they've got close competition, is New York and Las Vegas. Not even Los Angeles, which I know well. I mean, Los Angeles has a lot of good food, but a lot better than it did when I first moved there, for sure. But
a lot of people would say Chicago, Ken.
It does, but I mean, I don't think anybody. Have you, other than native Chicagoans, have you ever seen somebody rank Chicago ahead of New York for food? Really?
No. But I can only go by what I like. I would say that California's got the best food that I've ever had. I now live in the Pacific Northwest, and Portland is a decent food city if you like food trucks. You're not going to find fancy restaurants that are nice, but for food, the food truck scene in Portland, banging. And if you want good Chinese food, going to Vancouver. I've never had better Chinese food than Vancouver. But then again, if you were going out for a nice dinner, you wouldn't say, hey, let's go get Chinese.
Wait, Vancouver, Washington, or Vancouver, Columbia?
Vancouver, BC.
It's in British Columbia, right, Roger?
Yes, correct. It's just above the border. It's a really interesting city to visit. It's much cleaner than the big cities on the West Coast. But if you go into this one area where they have this large data center, it's on a street called Hastings. Like you could, like all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is where you hide it. And so what they've done is they've basically permitted all of the lowlifes to hang out in about a 6-block radius, and then the rest of the city is fine. And I don't know what the deal is. Maybe they just don't police that area, so they're like, hey, look, if you want to fucking be on crack, go hang out over there. But there's about a 6-block radius of Vancouver that's horrible, and then the rest of the city is.
Well, I would disagree with you that if you were going out for a nice meal, that you would automatically exclude the Chinese or Asian restaurants. I mean, that's kind of like the bias of, the American bias of, like the only really good meal is a steak and lobster or steak or whatever. I mean, I don't agree with that at all. And by the way, a lot of the Asian restaurants, at least even near me now, there's a lot of places that have Wagyu, real Wagyu, Japanese Wagyu. And Japanese Wagyu is, it's really good stuff. But, it's an Asian restaurant. A lot of them are, but we have, Korean places that have Wagyu,
You know the problem with Korean food? I just don't know what it is. There was a Korean spot in San Jose, California, and if I went with my Korean friend, I'd be like, oh, okay, because the food's out, and you grab it like Sizzler style, and you put raw meat on your plate, you take it back to your table, it has a fucking barbecue on your table, and the Korean guys, they know how to cook it, but there's something weird about just having raw food, raw meat sitting out in the open and letting people.
Okay,
You have the nature of this man here. If your lordship cannot tell what is true and what is not, and I fear his judgment is beyond
Hot pot's in the bowl with the, where you get, this is Korean barbecue where they literally, the table itself has like an oven embedded into the.
right.
You're talking about Chinese hot pot. Those are two different things. I'm familiar with that too. But right now I was talking about Korean. But we can. I think the same goes for both. Where you're cooking it yourself. Why the fuck would you go to a restaurant and they bring you raw food and then you cook it yourself.
That's true. And by the way, some of the places, this even in Vegas, they don't have staff. You don't want to do that. They'll cook it for you. You know, I mean, they'll handle, if you don't want to handle the utensils, the meat, whatever. I mean, they'll do it for you. You know,
I just think restaurants are getting crazy. Like, it used to be, they prided themselves not just on the food, but on the service, right? Now, the biggest deal is the fast casual, where they want you to tip
Do
them,
you want to
and they
receive?
don't even bring the food to you, right? I feel like it's just gotten out of hand. And then when you go to a restaurant where they want you to cook your own food, it's like, dude, if I want to cook my own food, I could have stayed home. Walmart is doing something interesting. It's not related to food, but it's just related to that audacity of you do the work and you pay extra. When they had installed all those self-checkouts, they realized that a lot of their stores were actually making less money. When they moved to that, they thought, oh, if we cut out the labor expense, we'll have more profits. But there was actually less people shopping. And so they were trying to figure out, like, well, what do we do with all this self-checkout? So now they've got a thing where you can subscribe to have the right to use the self-checkout. So even though people didn't like the self-checkout, now they've got a thing where they want you to pay for it. So imagine that. You have to pay to bag your own groceries, where the old deal was you came in, you bought your groceries, and the store paid the person to bag your groceries. I think this world's moving in the wrong.
That's ridiculous. So let me ask you, because we don't have a lot of Walmarts near, like, we're in my immediate vicinity. We have them in Vegas, obviously. So I don't shop at Walmart, okay? But you're telling me if I walked into a Walmart and I wouldn't have been a subscriber, I wouldn't even know about this. But if I happened to find a Walmart and I walked in, you know, got a couple of things and went to the checkout.
It's not all of them. It's test markets. It's not all
Okay.
Walmarts. I think eventually what we'll head to is what they do at the Amazon Go stores. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but in Seattle, you walk in, you grab you first scan your Amazon account, and then you walk in and you literally just grab things and you leave, and then it automatically bills you.
Yeah,
You don't.
more places like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't even see the people. Although somebody on Clubhouse, when we were talking about it, was saying that it's not real automation that they're deploying, but that they have cameras, and that there's people in India monitoring the cameras, and then they see that you've logged in, then they watch what you put in, and then they manually ring it in. If that's the truth, I don't know if that's the truth. Somebody on Clubhouse said that. If that's the truth, that's the most ridiculous thing.
I don't believe that's right. But by the way, fast casual in general, as a category,